Stories from eternity.
In 1990, in the town of Griswold, Connecticut, two boys were playing near a gravel pit when the ground gave way and human skulls rolled out of the hillside. The police came first, thinking they had a crime scene. Then the archaeologists came and found something stranger than a crime. It was a forgotten farm cemetery from the early 1800s. Most of the graves were ordinary, but one coffin, marked with brass tacks spelling the initials JB, held a body that had been deliberately rearranged. Years after burial, someone had opened this grave, taken the skull and the thigh bones, and laid them neatly on the chest. A skull and crossbones, made from the man himself. Archaeologists published the find. Scientists later pulled DNA from the bones and even worked out the man's likely name, John Barber, a poor farmer who died of tuberculosis. And the researchers concluded that what happened to his body was not vandalism and not ritual murder. It was medicine, folk medicine, performed by frightened people to stop the dead man from doing something. Because for about 100 years, across New England, in the shadow of the American Revolution and the age of steam engines and telegraphs, ordinary Protestant farmers were quietly digging up their own family members. This is the story of the last time it happened. It has a date, a place, and a name. March 17th, 1892. Exeter, Rhode Island. Mercy Brown. To understand what was done to Mercy, you have to understand the disease that ruled that century. They called it consumption. We call it tuberculosis. And the old name was the honest one, because that is exactly what it looked like. It consumed people, slowly, over months and years. The sick grew pale and thin, coughing blood, wasting away as though something was feeding on them a little every night. It was the leading killer of the age, and it moved through families, one member after another, in a chain no one could explain, because the bacterium that caused it would not be identified until 1882, and even then, the news traveled slowly, and cures traveled slower. So when a family began to die, one by one, each new victim fading exactly as the last one had, the old folk belief offered an explanation that at least made a terrible kind of sense. The first to die was not resting. The first to die was still hungry. Something in the grave was drawing the life out of the living relatives, night after night, and the proof was in the bodies of the victims themselves, growing thinner while something unseen grew fat. New Englanders did not use the word vampire. The newspapers did, later, with a sneer. The families themselves just spoke of a sickness in the blood of the dead, and of the remedy. Open the graves. Examine the bodies. Find the one that is too fresh, the one with liquid blood still in the heart, and burn that heart. Now come to Exeter, Rhode Island, a hard, rocky farming town, emptying out as its young people left for the mills, so depleted that people called it one of the border towns, half abandoned, all stone walls and scrub pine. On a farm there lived George Bram, a respected farmer, with his wife Mary Eliza and their children. In 1883, consumption took Mary Eliza. 7 months later, it took the eldest daughter, Mary Olive, 20 years old. The town noted her funeral and the hymn that was sung, one she had chosen herself as she died. The family carried on, the way farm families did. For a few years the disease seemed to leave them alone. Then, around 1891, it came back for the son, Edwin, a big, strong young man, newly married, working as a store clerk. He began to fade. He tried the era's best remedy, moving west to the dry air of Colorado Springs, and while he was away, The disease reached back into the farmhouse and took one more. Mercy Lena Brown, 19 years old, the quiet middle daughter who had helped raise the younger children after their mother died. Her decline was fast, what doctors of the time called the galloping kind. She died in January of 1892, and here is a detail that matters. It was a Rhode Island January. The ground was frozen too hard for digging, so Mercy was not buried. Her coffin was placed in the small stone crypt at Chestnut Hill Cemetery, above ground, in the cold, to wait for spring. Remember that. The neighbors did not. Edwin came home from Colorado worse, not better. He was dying now, hollow-cheeked, coughing, describing a weight on his chest at night, a feeling of being pressed down and drained. And around the Brown farm, the whispering that had probably never fully stopped grew louder. 3 dead from one household, a 4th on his way. Some of the old men of Exeter went to George Brown with the old remedy. "One of your dead is feeding on Edwin," they told him. "Let us look at the bodies. It cannot hurt them. It might save him." George Brown did not believe it. That is in the record, and it is one of the saddest parts of this story. He was not a superstitious man, but he was a man who had buried his wife and 2 daughters, and was about to bury his son, and the neighbors pressed, and the doctor agreed to attend, and in the end he gave his consent and, reportedly, could not bring himself to go with them. On the morning of March 17th, 1892, a small group of men opened the Brown graves. Mary Eliza, dead 9 years, was bones. Mary Olive, dead 8 years, was bones. Then they opened the crypt, and the coffin inside it, and looked at Mercy, dead 9 weeks, kept all that time in cold storage in a New England winter. She had not gone the way of her mother and sister. She lay on her side, they said. There was color in her. And when the doctor, a man named Harold Metcalf, opened her chest to examine her, he found what the old remedy said to look for. The heart held liquid blood. Dr. Metcalf told the men plainly that this was ordinary, that a body kept 9 weeks in freezing cold is preserved, and that clotted and liquid blood in a heart means nothing but death. He said, in effect, that there was no vampire in that crypt, only a girl. The men heard him out, and then they took Mercy's heart and her liver and carried them to a nearby rock and burned them to ash, because the doctor had science, but the neighbors had watched a family being eaten alive for 9 years, and the old remedy had one more step, and they were not going to leave it unfinished. The ashes were gathered, stirred into a tonic, and given to Edwin Brown to drink, the heart of his own sister. As medicine, Edwin died on the 2nd of May, less than 2 months later. The Providence Journal reported the whole affair within days, and the tone of the coverage is its own historical document. The editors were appalled. Here was the age of Edison and Pasteur, and in their own state, a body exhumed and a heart burned on a rock over a folk belief the paper compared to the darkest superstitions of past centuries. The story ran out over the wires and was picked up far beyond Rhode Island, and somewhere in that spreading ripple of newsprint, it reached one reader we know about. When Bram Stoker died, his research notes for Dracula were found among his papers. In them was a newspaper clipping from a New York paper, an article about the New England vampire exhumations, with the Exeter case at its center. Stoker was building his novel through those very years, and scholars have pointed at his doomed Lucy Westenra, a 19-year-old girl who wastes away, dies, is visited in her tomb, and is put to rest by men with a knife and a purpose, and asked the obvious question, how much of the most famous vampire story on earth is built on the bones of a real girl from Rhode Island? Mercy Brown still lies in Chestnut Hill Cemetery in Exeter, beside her mother, her sister, and Edwin. Her gravestone stands there today. It has been visited so often by folklorists and horror fans and the simply curious that the stone once had to be anchored against theft. People still leave things on it, coins, flowers, little notes, and that is the ending I want to leave you with, because this story has no monster in it. Science found the graves at Griswold and gave the man his name back. Medicine explained everything the men of Exeter saw in that crypt. Every part of the mystery has been solved for over a century. And yet, the people of Exeter were not stupid, and they were not cruel. They were watching something invisible move through a family and drain it, person by person, year after year, and everything they did to save the last brother. They were wrong about the cause. They were not wrong about the thing itself. There really was something in that house, passing silently from the dead to the living, feeding on that family for 9 years. It just had no face to put on a gravestone. So when you hear the word vampire, forget the castle and the cape. Think of a small cold cemetery in Rhode Island, a crypt in winter, a doctor explaining patiently, uselessly, that there is nothing here, and a circle of ordinary men who loved their neighbor standing around a fire on a rock, doing the unthinkable, because the alternative was doing nothing while Edwin died. That is what a vampire looked like in America. It looked like grief.